Nothing contained in this podcast should be considered a substitute for professional medical advice. This content does not represent our respective employers and is purely the opinion of the podcast hosts. We are not your personal medical providers. Sorry, friends. So, if you have any questions or concerns or seeking advice, diagnosis, and or treatment, please seek individual, personalized advice from a healthcare provider in your area. We are not liable for any risks or issues associated with using or acting upon the information contained in this podcast. This is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only, so enjoy the ride. Welcome to Medical Media Mixer, the perfect cocktail. I'm Nicole Peniston, psychologist.
And I'm Tara Prisco, physician assistant. All right, take two on a Monday night.
Monday night, 2 drinks in. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I did, there's still definitely alcohol in it, but I did a lighter. Do you remember when we did the Guy Who Wants to Live Forever, that episode, there was that liqueur, the aloe liqueur. So I used that and a little vodka, some squeeze of lime and some seltzer. I figured like a light drink.
Yeah, I need to try that aloe liqueur. Wait, no, I did try it at your house. You made it for me.
It has like cucumber in it too, I think. It's very...
I love cucumber. I love a cucumber.
Oh, you know what I should have done? Because it has like a cucumber watermelon feel. We have watermelon. I could have mashed up watermelon. I should have thought of that.
Muddled watermelon and like a sprig of mint.
Yeah.
Chef kiss.
See?
Look at that. We're making our own coffee.
Any other interesting news?
Interesting news. So as I said, I'm going to Cape May this weekend. My friend was supposed to go down with her husband, but they had some family stuff, so they offered the trip to me and our other friends. We're going to go down for the weekend and maybe hit up a winery, have a little girls' night.
Yeah, Cape May's so cute. It's so nice. Like if those people who are not from this area, it's such a cool little, like it's got like all these historic houses and it's just neat and like little shops.
And I've never done it, but apparently there's a lot of ghost tours out there too.
Ooh.
Which that would be fun during spooky season.
Yes. All right. Put it in the books. We got to do it.
Done. All the things we're putting in this invisible book.
it's our assistant back there. You don't see them?
It's our the invisible assistant with the invisible book written in invisible ink. None of these things are actually happening.
Oh my goodness. I am like running on steam because I had a 12-hour day yesterday traveling to and from the city to see Wicked, which was amazing, and I would do it again. But we left like the train here at like 9:20 in the morning and didn't get back till about 8:45. So it was a long day.
That is a long day. I saw Wicked in London.
Oh.
On the West End, so it was really fun.
Yeah, it is. It's the second time I saw it. I saw it 20 years ago when it was new. And then my youngest has been reinvigorated with interest since the movie. And so this was her big, very expensive birthday gift. But it was kind of a gift to me too, because I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I love a good show. I've been wanting to go see a show, but like all the ones that like I had been obsessing over, I finally got to go see all of them. So the last show that I saw was 6 that I had been wanting to see for quite some time.
Right.
So now I'm like, what's my next show going to be? And I keep hearing good things about the Stranger Things show, but it was so expensive when it was in previews. And like, that's a lot to pay for like a show that like you don't know if it's going to make it.
A lot of people have been talking about The Outsiders.
I never liked the book.
Or the movie or the book. Well, my thing is...
I felt like it was imposed upon us.
Right. Well, we were forced to watch it. All I just remember is Pony Boy. That's about all I remember. But I feel like it's a very serious thing to make into a musical. So I'm a little concerned about how that translates.
Yeah. You know what I would have loved to see, but we missed our window, was when Newsies was on Broadway.
Yeah, that's fun. Amazing. We also hit up Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, which is so much fun. My little one didn't know who half the people were. I'm like, I'm going to take a picture. Don't worry. We'll take a selfie with this one.
That's so funny. I've never been to the one in New York. I've been to the one in Vegas. I've been to the one in London.
Did we go to the one in Vegas together way back a million years ago? I think so.
Because I've been to the one in Vegas like multiple times.
Yeah, I think we did. It was cute. It was fun. It was worth it to kind of kill a little time, and just to have a little fun and take some pictures. And, it was cute. It was fun.
Maybe I need to do an episode on wax museums because the idea of it is really bizarre. If you think about it.
Is there some sort of like creepy psychologic thing to like almost human? Is there a term, like a word for that? Like so realistic.
ChatGPT?
No, but like so realistic looking that it makes you feel creepy. You know what I mean? Like
I'm sure there's something, but what I'm thinking of more is like I believe, and I could be wrong on this, that whole idea originated from that first back in like Victorian times when they would do like a death match for people.
Yes.
So I feel like it's somehow connected to that.
Yeah.
And that is creepy.
It is, because they had in here like Madame Tussauds death mask of like what she would have looked like, I guess, and her husband, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. There is something like creepy about sometimes when you walk in and you get this feeling of like, wait, which ones are these the fake ones? Like, because you just see there's people moving and people not moving, and it takes you a second for your brain.
For a horror movie. Yeah. It's meant for horror movies.
They had a horror section that said, do not go here unless you're over 13 because you're going to be scared. So we didn't go in that section.
So, I was going to say, so you guys didn't go.
No.
Although you were well over 13 and you would not have gone.
No, I'm not a scaredy cat. I'm not.
I don't like jump scares. I don't mind other things. I don't like a jump scare.
I don't like it, but I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. I don't favor it per se, jump scares, but I would do it anyway.
I prefer like psychological horror where you have to like think about, or like all those new movies that are coming out that are like body horror and like stuff like that. I prefer.
Yeah.
To, like just somebody jumping.
Right. I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean, but I would have done it. I'm not scared. I swear, I'm not scared.
So shall we get into it?
Sure.
So today, my cocktail is called the Sleeping Beauty cocktail.
Ooh.
So it is 2 ounces of vanilla vodka, 1 ounce of raspberry liqueur. I use Chambord because I love Chambord. 4 ounces of Sprite and cherry for garnish. So you put the ice, the liqueur, and the vodka in a shaker. Shake vigorously until well chilled and combined. Strain into a cocktail glass filled with ice, top with Sprite. Stir to blend the flavors, not the favors, and garnish with maraschino cherries. And then there were some pro tips for a sweeter twist. Substitute Sprite with a lemon lime soda, which I'm like,
that is a lemon lime soda.
Yeah. Or add a splash of grenadine. So I added a splash of grenadine to make mine look a little bit more
pink,
red.
Yeah.
And then to make it extra special, you can rim the glass with sugar or add some edible glitter. Girl,
that's a little too much.
For that. For a Monday night a second recording, ain't nobody got time.
Nope.
For that. I'm sure it tastes and looks amazing if you do that. I was not doing that tonight.
Yeah, but I like it. It sounds cute.
And it's pretty tasty. Like I said, I like Chambord, so I like that in most things. I did add a touch more Sprite than I should have just because it is a Monday night and this is my second drink, so I had to water down a little bit.
A little bit.
So today, I'm going to talk about a film that I have watched actually a total of 3 times without realizing it.
So it's not Sleeping Beauty.
It's not Sleeping Beauty. It's not. And the weird thing is at one point they reference Snow White, which I'm like...
See, that's where I got that from. I said something about Snow White when I was like, what's your topic today? Snow White?
No, Sleeping Beauty. So the film is on Netflix and it is called Life Overtakes Me. And so it's filmed in Sweden. It's a Swedish-American documentary. My syllables are all out. And then in English, apparently, it's called The Apathetic Children. When I saw it, it's called Life Overtakes Me.
The Apathetic Children. That sounds like a great one.
Yeah, it's not the best
Title.
English translation. No. I think it's supposed to be the direct translation from Swedish of De apistaka barren.
Okay.
So I think that's the literal translation from Swedish.
Doesn't sound so good in English.
Yeah, doesn't carry very well. So it was originally released on Netflix in June 14th, 2019. So I think this is why I watched it multiple times. Because I know I watched it at one point during the pandemic when we were all locked down and had nothing to do. And then I know I watched it a second time because I totally forgot I saw it. And then when I was looking for ideas, I started watching it again. And I was like, wait a minute. I've seen this, but I still watched it. So if I can watch it 3 times and enjoy it all 3 times, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I worry about my own memory for not remembering, but I also think if anyone's watched it or if you decide to watch it, it is a very kind of, I don't know the right word to describe it, but it's a very neutral documentary. Like nothing super exciting happens, nothing like over the top super memorable, but it's like an interesting story.
Okay.
So I think that's why you could watch it multiple times and be like, oh yeah, I did see this. So, have you watched it or have you heard of it?
I have not.
Okay. So, it is a Swedish documentary about how... So, what I learned in the beginning of this documentary, all 3 times that I watched it, was that apparently in Sweden, a lot of refugee families go there from neighboring European countries when they're seeking asylum. And so there's a large number of refugee children in Sweden.
Okay.
And so the film is following this very strange, unusual number of children who suddenly, essentially, well, it's both sudden and gradual, so it's weird. So it's a bunch of children out of nowhere without previous signs gradually lapse into a coma-like state.
I feel like maybe I did see this.
I told you. This is one of those things you could watch 17 times.
I feel like maybe I did.
Yeah. So they call it resignation syndrome.
Okay. Yes.
In English, they call it that. Although I have to say, because I have to pronounce this because I love it, in Swedish, it is called uppgivenhet syndrome.
Ah. Do you know actually how to pronounce words in Swedish?
No, it literally is uppgivenhet syndrome.
Okay.
Just all one word. But I could pronounce it, so I was all excited. All that time in IKEA.
That reminds me of when I went to Iceland. And we rented a car and we got the GPS so we could know where, or maybe we were using our phones. I don't recall. But the GPS announcing all the street names, I'm like, I couldn't tell you what word that was. I couldn't tell you if that's the correct street name because he's huge.
My current GPS says words wrong all the time. There's a street near me called Meadowbrook, and my GPS calls it Meadowbrook.
The emphasis is on the wrong syllable, as you said
exactly.
Earlier. That's what you were trying to get to.
I'm so glad you understand that right.
That's the movie with the flight attendants, right?
Yes. It's a great movie. We should cover it for no other reason.
No other reason then. We could talk about in-flight emergencies.
Oh,
whoa.
Like that's right up your alley.
It is.
And I have an anecdote about that. So, about how I was in a plane that had
You were an in-flight emergency.
I mean, I am an in-flight emergency daily, but I was not the cause in that one.
No.
So anyway, back to Life Overtakes Me. So it was nominated for an Oscar for Best Short Subject Documentary at the 92nd Academy Awards in 2020.
Those are the ones they probably don't like put up on the...
Yeah, they're the ones that like you
happen backstage. Yeah.
But it did not win, but it was nominated. So that means it's a pretty good documentary. So apparently, I did not know this until I looked up on the Wikipedia page, that there was some controversy regarding the documentary because apparently one of the children in the documentary was supposedly pressured by their parents to simulate resignation syndrome. There are multiple children that are followed throughout this documentary. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't say which one, but I suspect I know which one because they cover multiple families. But there's one family where a young girl has it and then she recovers and then suddenly her sister gets it. The sister getting it is the fake one. Mm-hmm. They don't say, and these are children, so we want to protect their anonymity, but something else was going on there too. But like I said, this has happened hundreds and hundreds of times. So these are the children they chose for the documentary, but there are definitely other children where this has been occurring with 4 words.
All of them.
So, resignation syndrome. So the documentary follows multiple families who have children who have this, and every single one of these families have sought asylum in Sweden from their home countries, and every single one of these children, at least that they cover in the documentary, their asylum status is in limbo. Okay. And so there's this underlying fear in the family that they may have to go back to whatever country that they sought asylum from. Mm-hmm. And so they think that this is almost like a PTSD reaction for these children. The interesting thing is, in a lot of these stories, these children were very, very young when this is happening. And so their recall or their understanding of the trauma in their home country and why they had to seek asylum is relatively limited. So it's kind of only like knowing from like hearing their parents talk about what happened in their home country. Right. Because like there's one girl in this documentary who I think she's like 5, and they said that they sought asylum from the former USSR when she was like an infant. Okay. So it's like some of this stuff, like, yeah, there's something definitely going on with these children, but like, is it true PTSD? Because they have no recall. Like they're not having those traditional PTSD things like flashbacks. It's more of a somatic symptom.
Right. I mean, maybe, just undertaking the stress that they feel from the family.
Yeah. And so that's one of the theories. But the documentary starts with this woman who ends up being a pediatrician where she is at one of the homes of this children, basically checking this child's vitals. And this child essentially just looks like she's taking a big old nap Like she's sleeping, you see her chest moving, but the pediatrician like takes her arms, moves her around, listens to her heart rate, does a bunch of like typical things that you would do in a physical, but the child is not responding. They're still just out asleep. And so then they start to talk about it. They do have these kids on feeding tubes. So she has the tube in, I forget what it's called when it's in your nose.
Nasal. Yeah. Nasogastric.
So they have that. Yeah, she has that, this first girl that they cover. And then you see, there's one thing about this documentary that some people may not like, but I feel like it really resonates with what's going on in it. There's a lot of silence in this documentary. So it's a lot of just watching someone sleep and there's no noise, or watching this kid essentially slumped over in a wheelchair. And it's silence because it's like, that's what their world is. Like, they're not responding to anything external. They're just sleeping.
That's probably very profound in the documentary, though.
It is. It's very artistic, but it also like really like kind of nails home the point of like, these kids don't appear to be in any sort of distress. They're just sleeping. They're just sleeping through whatever has become too overwhelming.
Right. Like so their little brain and body couldn't handle it.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. Blood pressure is normal. There's a slightly high pulse rate, but they also feel like it's in reaction to like, if you think about it, like these kids have been sleeping and now there's like 5 people in the room. There's a cameraman. There's the boom operator.
Stimuli,
so like, maybe it's the stimuli that they're reacting to. But they check their reflexes. Everything is normal. Like all of the typical physical signs that you would think that someone is really struggling because they're not awake, these children don't have. They're just sleeping and not responding to being awoken in any sort of way. And they don't really talk. Like, I don't believe at all they do any sort of CAT scan or brain imaging to see what's going on internally. I don't know if that's because of where they're at. Maybe they don't have access to that, or maybe it's too expensive. I don't know, but they don't really do any neurological testing other than the typical like neuro exam you would do in a doctor's office, which they can't do half of that because these children aren't alert. So they can't do like the eye tracking movement or, all that stuff.
You would think that they would just throw them in a scanner of some sort, right?
Yeah. But again, this is in Sweden. These are families who have sought asylum. So maybe they just don't have access to that stuff.
Right.
Or they don't know to ask for it.
Right.
So like the one family, like I said, they had come over from the former USSR because there was a lot, they had essentially were being threatened by what they allude to as mafia members for extortion and persecution. So they left, but then they also kind of allude to those people being part of the police. And so we do know that there's a lot of political corruptness in certain countries and they can pressure these families and things like that. So they basically said that the only trauma that they can recall this child seeing was at one point they were driving somewhere and they got pulled over by the police, but then when the police came up, they could tell they weren't real police, and they dragged the parents out of the car and started to beat the mother and the father.
Oh, wow.
And then the mother was able to escape. She grabbed the little girl and ran, but the father did not escape.
Oh.
And then he did eventually return sometime later, but they said the girl did, know that something was going on, and she said, they took my dad. We have to go find him. And then, like I said, shortly thereafter, the dad is able to escape and then come back home. They flee to Sweden, where it's quite a long process. So they can go to Sweden and stay there. But in order for them to be allowed to stay there long term, they have to do a lot of paperwork, have a lot of interviews, things like that, essentially prove that they cannot return because it's dangerous to their lives. So a lot of these refugee families are there on a temporary basis until they can find somewhere else to go. It's not necessarily the plan is to stay in Sweden long term. It's just, okay, do you need to stay here, or is there some other country we can help you get to? So and this has been going on, this type of asylum seeking, since the late 1990s, I believe. But that's also when resignation syndrome was first reported in the late 1990s. Between 2003 and 2005, more than 400 cases were reported in just those 2 years. So there was definitely some sort of spike, and I am the worst at knowing international news, but I would assume between 2003 and 2005, there was a lot of unrest in some of those neighboring countries, and so I'm sure people were fleeing more than they had prior to that. So then over the last decade, the number has decreased, but it's still there. So in 2015 and 2016, there were 169 cases. So that's nothing to sneeze at.
No, it's still a decent amount.
children. Yeah. And so they started trying to look into what are some of the common threads of these families. And one of them is a lot of these children were from the former USSR, the Balkans, Roma children. So I believe that's what we used to call gypsies.
Yes.
Romani, Romani, whatever. But it's, these families who really don't have a home base that's safe for them. But then they said most of those children were coming with families, so they weren't coming by themselves. And then only a very small number of those children who had resignation syndrome were unaccompanied migrants. None of them have been African. Very few have been Asian. So they do feel like there must be some sort of cultural piece to this. And then a lot of the children, because they're coming to Sweden so young, they've grown up in a Swedish culture. They speak the language. And so going back to those other countries that are very different can be scary for them. Just the idea of having to pick up and go somewhere else that they don't know anything about. So there have been conditions similar to resignation syndrome reported among Nazi concentration camp inmates. In the UK, there was something called pervasive refusal syndrome, identified as early as the 1900s, but it's only a very small handful of cases, and none of them were asylum seekers. So it's something, I'm sorry, not the 1900s, the 1990s. So there's definitely something going on with children in response to this type of familial PTSD or stress, but they don't know a ton about it. So basically what they're doing with these children in the documentary is it essentially looks like palliative care. They're keeping them comfortable, they're keeping them fed, but they're not really doing a whole bunch. They're not trying to
wake them or stimulate them in some way, shape, or form.
No. The only sort of stimulation they're doing are exercises to keep the muscles from wasting, playing music, playing her favorite cartoons. This one particular girl, putting her in a wheelchair to, take her outside and get fresh air.
Yeah.
But then they do feeding and changing as if she's an infant. Like I said, this one girl's like 5 years old. There's another one who's like 11. So these are not little babies.
Right.
These are larger children. So it's much harder for these parents to do that. And then if you think about it too, these parents had to leave their supposed home country or leave whatever country that they started their family at, come to this new country, establish residency, get jobs, get finances, all this stuff. And now their kids have this bizarre illness and they don't know what to do. And it's like they're losing their children.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure I've watched this now that you're telling me everything. I'm like, I feel like I know this.
It's bizarre. Yeah.
It is.
So until recently, in Sweden, the families were allowed to stay until their children recovered.
Right.
They have changed that now
in the
last 3 years. If the family doesn't get their paperwork together or whatever, if they don't have what they need to stay there, they have to leave regardless of the children. So most applicants are granted either a 3-year or a 13-month visa. And so when it expires, they kind of have to either go back to the country they came from or go somewhere else. And not to crap on Sweden. It seems like they're doing everything they can to help these families and get them somewhere safe.
Right.
But they can't do everything for them. Because it's the other thing. I do believe in Sweden they have universal health care. So these children are being cared for.
Okay.
They're having doctors come to their homes and take care of them and of their children. And they have a place to stay, a temporary residence. And so there's it's a very difficult situation to be in for these parents, just not knowing what's going on with their child and when they'll recover. So in the course of this documentary, as I alluded to before, one particular child does make a recovery. So she's actually the first child that's in the opening scene where she's asleep. Like I said, they're checking her vitals. Everything's fine. By the end, she is alert and awake and seemingly has no ill effects of this sleeping for, I believe it was 9 months.
And do they ask if she has any recollection of things happening?
They do. And she says she doesn't remember. She remembers that she was sick, but she doesn't remember anything that happened when she was sick. But even the way that she talks, she seems like a normal 5-year-old. There's nothing unusual about her behavior, her interactions, her motor skills. She's running around the playground and going up the ladder and running down the slide and talking to the camera and smiling and laughing. And it's just what happened?
It's like their little body just couldn't handle it. Said, need to turn off. Power down.
And that's why they call it resignation syndrome, because these children are kind of resigning to the fact that their life is chaos. So they just kind of opt out for a brief amount of time.
Yeah, but it is so interesting that it's specifically refugees, specifically European. I mean, there's plenty of
children.
Right, specifically children. There's so many other traumatic things or traumatic mass things that happen.
Yeah. It's just insane. Some of the symptoms that they said is that children gradually kind of slow down. So as I said before, the one sister of this one girl starts to have it. And so towards the beginning of it, you see her helping to care for her sister, going to school, talking with her parents. And then gradually she just kind of has psychomotor slowness. She's not talking as much, kind of withdrawing a bit, which can look a little bit like depression. But then she almost seems unable to walk or to talk. And there's one point where she's like sitting up in bed, but like she literally looks like she cannot move her body.
Right.
She can barely keep her eyes open. And then her eyes close and she just doesn't wake up.
I'd be curious for them to do like an EEG to see what the brain waves are doing.
Yeah.
Is this sleep? Is this catatonia? Is this, I mean, because the brain waves are going to look differently.
Right. And especially you make a good mention of catatonia we've talked about in other episodes, but in this they do like I said, you see the doctor doing a regular check of their vitals, you see the parents doing some muscle exercises, and so they don't necessarily have that waxy flexibility,
right?
They're not freezing in midair or things like that, but similar to catatonia, not really responding to external stimuli, but it seems like, you know, typical breathing, normal function.
But this also feels like the encephalitis lethargica thing, and that was during the war, and so if that was trauma, but that was mostly adults, but that was also trauma.
People didn't make a full recovery.
Right.
Those
True.
people had lasting damage.
True.
Yeah. So that's the other part of it. And so they think that trauma is a key factor in the onset of the syndrome. There's a particular doctor who feels like it's a form of protection, kind of putting yourself into a coma to avoid these issues. And I'm not saying that people can't do this, but I don't know if it's that intentional.
No.
You know what I mean? Just like dissociation isn't intentional.
But it's a
function of your body.
Right. But I think that that's what it makes sense that it is. It's a function of your body to protect itself.
Yeah. But then, like you said, why do the adults not have that functional protection of themselves? Why is it only these young
Something
children? Why
about
is it
those
only in Sweden?
malleable brains. Yeah. It's only in Sweden.
We know that there's lots of other countries where children are constantly in danger, and there's lots of trauma for themselves and for families, and we don't see that in these countries.
But it's almost when they're out of the acute, and then they're like, and they just go to sleep because they're not in the
body has to reset
in the immediate danger where your adrenaline and all your fight or flight is going.
Exactly. I was going to say all of your sensory processes have been on fire, alert for so long that now it's almost like the opposite. You have to, like, turn it off and restart it like a computer almost.
Yeah, like I said, power down like a robot.
Yeah. And so there's a really interesting article on the National Library of Medicine about resignation syndrome, and there is a retrospective cohort study in, what year is this? 2021, so pretty recent, saying that separation, not a residency permit, restores function in resignation syndrome. So it's not that being in limbo, it's just the time away from that trauma, the separation from that situation is what is restoring people's function, these children's function. It's not about where do we go next. They could go anywhere next. It's just the longer you are away from it.
It's when it comes back.
Yeah. And then I believe they say this in the documentary, because I know I'm not making this up. I heard it somewhere. But there had been some children who had more than one incidence of resignation syndrome. So it wasn't like it was a one-off thing and they recovered and they were fine. I don't think it recurred as often in most children, but it did. It happened a couple of times. So it's worth noting that it wasn't like this happens once and then once you're okay, you're okay. It did recur in a couple of people. And then there's a bunch of articles that'll be in the show notes about the same thing. This one article, I don't love it, but I put it in just because it's kind of giving that alternate idea of it, talking about how this is a psychosomatic illness, which we've talked about before.
Right.
Psychosomatic illnesses are real syndromes.
Right.
They're real illnesses that people have, but they have a psychological underpinning.
Right.
But the way this article is talking about it is like, oh, these people are just making it up. You know, they got mental health problems, so they just make this stuff up.
Right.
That's not what this is. So it's a little disappointing. but they reference a few other mystery illnesses. So mystery of 18 twitching girls in New York. Mysterious sleeping sickness spreads in Kazakhstani village. 200 Colombian girls fall ill with mysterious illness. The mystery of Havana syndrome. So
Havana syndrome is with like they thought it was like sound waves or something, right?
Yeah, near the military bases.
Yeah.
That where there's a documentary about that.
Yeah, but in this, does it have more of a female predilection?
No, it's boys and girls.
Just because, all the
girls are known for our hysteria.
Yes, we are. I mean, and some of these other ones that you mentioned said girls.
Yeah.
I wonder though if there is some genetic component, if you're saying it's more Eastern European likely, and the Romani, they probably have a lot of, I don't want to use the word inbreeding because that's not the word I'm trying, but more of a closed genetic community. A smaller genetic pool to draw from. And maybe there's like a switch that we don't understand yet that is more common in this genetic pool that can turn off, because that would seem to make sense. And even you say Kazakhstan, although that sort of borders that Russia/Middle East, and so genetically may have a little bit more of that Eastern European DNA as well. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. So in this article, that again, not like
dismisses it.
It's not dismissing it. It's more of like playing devil's advocate for it, but it feels a little harsh. So this one line says, "It seemed to me that resignation syndrome was a social disorder masquerading as a medical one." And then it says, "It was clear to me that Swedish children's plight would not be solved by a neurologist or a brain scan. It is a language of distress, and it made me wonder about all the other mystery illnesses and what those children may be trying to say." So they do talk about the American girls. I can tell you about that if you like.
Oh, the American girls. Aw.
Not those. But in 2011.
Oh, darn. It's not like Kit or whatever her name is. And the other one. No. Darn. I thought maybe.
Not about Samantha.
Yes.
Calm down. I mean, maybe they all have trauma. I mean, they do all have trauma. Have you read some of those books?
Yeah.
I read a couple, and it was, So in 2011, a group of American schoolgirls began twitching uncontrollably, and they were diagnosed by the neurologist with a psychosomatic disorder. But then there was a media frenzy over this diagnosis and a hunt for an environmental toxin that was never found.
Right. We've heard of these small things popping up, but this one just seems more significant as far as numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like over time, too, we've had, like I said, it's been happening since the early 1900s.
Right.
And it's only been happening in that region. It's only been happening to this group of people. So it's saying something about what they're going through and how they're responding to that stress. So then they talk about hysteria and this.
Yeah, hysteria. Love it. That uterus acting up.
Stupid vagina. Yeah. So not a huge fan of this article, but I included it because I like to be balanced and talk about everybody's idea of things. Is the article written by a man? It is actually,
of course it is.
It's not written by a man.
No,
that's the sad thing.
Oh no, it's a woman bashing woman.
Yeah, well, whatever. So they basically are talking about what other things it could be and how they followed this one particular girl and how she's doing better now. She's awake. She's not speaking, but there's progress in her recovery. So she eats, she goes to school sometimes, but she's not fully functional as she was prior to it. So I guess even though the article is definitely very, I don't want to say dismissive because it's talking about it, but it's basically saying like, this is a mental health problem. I'm not saying that it's not, but I feel like there's more to it.
Right. But mental health is health. Number one.
Exactly. And yes, mental health is health.
Right.
And it is just important as physical.
Exactly. So that shouldn't mean dismissive. It should be like, let's look a little further into this.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think inevitably what happens, especially as you were talking about before, when these things tend to happen to women, it is then dismissed as being over emotional or not being able to handle stress or things like that. And so it's attributed to these negative things when there might be some truth to it. It could be just really not being able to handle the stress of it. Why does it have to be the woman that can't handle the stress? And like I said before, boys were impacted.
Right. And this is younger children who are less likely to be that socially jump on the bandwagon. Like we've seen these other ones you're talking about where it's teenage girls, right?
Right.
Oh, this one had a seizure. Now this one had a seizure, or this one, I'm going to probably make people mad. This one saw Jesus in the rocks or the whatever. And then this one saw it. And it's teenage.
How dare you? You went to Catholic school. How dare you? Yeah. Jesus was in the toast. He was in the toast.
Is it Padua in Portugal? Is that the one? But anyway, the point being that I could see that in older children who there's an attention seeking component, but these little ones, and they're probably not necessarily even connected socially.
And that's what I was going to say. There's really not showing that these children are part of a community that know each other.
Right.
Which that may be even more reason why they're having this. They have no one else to connect to, no one else who understands what they've been through.
Yeah. No, my theory is, there's a genetic something, and that this trauma, they have a defense mechanism of powering down, right?
Yeah. And then, just as I was saying, it does occur in boys as well. So there's a really nice article by the New Yorker that talks about the documentary, but also talks about this one boy. I'll just read this one paragraph because it gives you like a good idea of what these children are like before and then when this occurs. So they said, Gregory is a Russian refugee who came to Sweden with his family when he was 5 years old and could talk at length about the virtues of the Volvo. His doctor described him as the most sweetified in his family.
Aww.
And he was the most popular boy in his class at school. For his 13th birthday, 2 of his friends listed some of the qualities that he evoked: energetic, fun, happy all the time, good human being, amazingly kind, awesome at soccer. And then Gregory gets he learns in summer 2015 that right before he entered the 7th grade, that the migration board had rejected his family's application. And he had to translate that letter for his parents because they couldn't read Swedish.
Oh, no.
So that's some pretty intense trauma.
Yeah.
Which I do think a lot of children of families who have immigrated do have to do that translation, which that can be traumatic too, having to tell your parents bad news or just having to be the go-between between your parents and these other adults. It can be really upsetting. And so he tried to focus on school and, do his normal things, go to hockey and play with his friends and hang out. And he told one of his friends that they were going to be deported as if they were criminals. And then he gradually just become more withdrawn and aloof. He stopped speaking in Russian, which he spoke with a lot of his other friends who were Russian, and with his family, he stopped speaking Russian. And then he stopped speaking altogether. And then he physically withdrew. And then essentially he just went to bed one day and didn't come out of bed.
Wow.
And so he said that he, and I'm guessing this is after the fact, he said that he felt like his body began to feel if it was entirely liquid. His limbs felt soft and porous, and all he wanted to do was close his eyes. Even swallowing required effort that he didn't feel he could muster. He felt deep pressure in his brain and his ears, and he tried to pound his fist against the wall, and he couldn't even do that. The next morning, he could not get out of bed. He couldn't eat. And his little sister fed him Coca-Cola in teaspoons by small sips, and he couldn't even swallow. So pretty quick decline. It was, like I said, it was gradual because he started not acting like himself, but then it was like nothing happens. And then he was basically limp, appeared to be asleep. He lost 13 pounds after the first week.
Wow.
So this kind of relates to what you were talking in the last episode about starvation.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what is happening biologically for these kids, because they said he had not eaten in 4 days. 13 pounds in 4 days. Like
so a pound is usually 3,000 calories, and a child wouldn't require 3,000 calories. So even 0 calories, their deficit wouldn't be. But under physiologic stress, that's why patients in the hospital require more calories because they're sick. So maybe that both psychological and physiologic stress, his body's working on overdrive.
Yeah. So basically this New Yorker article follows what happens to Gregory, or I was not misreading, they do call him Georgie at one point. But that kind of just gives you an idea of what these children are going through in the experience. What I thought was really interesting was the way that he described it, a lot of internal pressure and his body feeling like liquid, that feels like it's like a biological thing.
Yeah. I almost could feel like I know what he means. Obviously not to that extent, but I do understand somehow on a core level what he means.
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting for a child who, they don't say, but I'm assuming he doesn't know English, so that was a translation. But we already know at 13 he speaks Russian and Swedish.
Yeah.
So that's pretty eloquent to
It
be able to
is.
describe those feelings of what was going on.
Yeah.
So like I said, they were talking about how this might be a culture-bound syndrome. Psychological illness pandemics can be specific to societies. There's a really interesting one in here I've never heard of called the Dahat syndrome. Have you heard about that?
Nope.
It happens in specific parts of India. It doesn't tell me which ones. But people they complain of impotence.
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 Back to the peen.
Back to the peen. And have the delusion that they're losing their semen.
It's just floating
like,
away.
But I'm like, okay, I don't have a peen, so I don't know what it's like to feel like I'm losing my semen, but I feel like I can understand what they mean. Like you feel like you're losing something. Like maybe like urinary incontinence, maybe that's what it feels like. Like you can't hold it anymore.
I don't know. It's just going away.
I don't know. And then in Nigeria, people who complain of a burning sensation in their heads, they're given, and this, I'm just quoting this directly, so nobody yell at me. They're given the diagnosis of brain fag.
Fag.
I'm hoping it's either a typo and it's supposed to be fog, or
fog, like fatigue.
Yeah, I don't know.
Fag also means cigarette in British.
I don't think it means brain cigarette. I don't think this means
burning. Wait.
True.
Burning. Something made sense there.
I still don't think in Nigeria they call it brain cigarette. I don't think that's happening.
I mean, but if they had colonization, some of their terms might be the same. Mm-hmm. Don't know. Just making shit up.
Yeah. So interesting part of this New Yorker article is as they're following this boy and his story, about halfway through the article, they revealed that a very good friend of his, who is also from Russia and lived next door, she had resignation syndrome 3 years before he did. So she got ill when she was 12. Her family's migration board application was rejected, and that was when he got it, or when she got it. And so this all happened. He watched this happen to his friend, and then it happened to him. So then that brings in, like we said before, that
social thing, right? And it's very much the same story.
Yeah, the same story. It's the same reaction. So this article really goes into depth about a lot of other people and how they respond to it, how the one particular doctor who is in that documentary treats these children, goes to their homes, visits them, tries to help the families get through it. But Gregory, like I said, he does recover and can tell his story about what happened. And one of the quotes from him is, "All of my will, I just didn't have it anymore." So like he's basically calling it what we're calling it, that he just had to kind of give up and withdraw. But it's very sweet. It sounds like his friends, like his classmates, would write him letters and come to visit him, and people were really rallying around him. So we always say that there's that protective factor of social support, but sometimes that might not be enough. And we've talked about that in other situations as well. Sometimes you can have a really great social environment, but if there is something that you need medically, that's not going to be enough for you.
Yeah.
And so, so that's resignation syndrome.
So, I mean, it's definitely choreomania, encephalitis lethargica, all these sort of mystery illnesses that we just haven't put our finger on. But that one's very modern. So I would think that we have the technology and the ability to investigate this one more.
Well, and like I said, in the documentary, they don't really talk a whole lot about brain scans. And then even in this, they basically allude to, well, brain scan's not going to show anything. Like,
I don't know.
Maybe it's like a parasite.
An EEG though, but like throw on, I want to know what waves are there. Like I want to know what, like there's, I don't know. Because you can differentiate sleep from wakefulness on an EEG. So is it true sleep or not? Because right there, that's a piece of information that, would help us.
Right.
Wow.
Well, and then, like I said, he does tell his tale after he recovers. And some of his quotes are, "I felt like I was deep underwater. I was just very tired. It was not like now. I want to go and run now. You don't have an appetite. It's like my whole body was water."
Oh, I love him. I hope he's okay and doing good.
Very sweet kid. And then he says, as he was recovering, Slowly, after some weeks or a month, I understood that it wasn't real anymore. I wasn't trapped in that glass box anymore. The glass wasn't real. And now I understand that it wasn't real at all. But at that time, it was very difficult because every move could kill you. I was living there.
Almost like locked in also.
Almost like locked in syndrome, yeah. Yeah, which that could be something that we cover on an episode because I feel like a lot of people don't know much about that. Although there is a movie called Locked In.
Okay.
It's got like a weird serial killer sort of true crime twist.
Okay.
But it was a really cool movie, and it talks about how people with locked in syndrome can communicate.
I remember when I was a student, one of my co-students had a patient who she really advocated for, even went to like a meeting they had with the family, and she was advocating that this person had locked in, that they had cognition and were able to communicate via whatever blinking. I don't recall exactly what it was.
You can use letter boards where you visually track
Right.
letters and spell. There's lots of different ways to help people with locked in syndrome communicate.
Yeah, there's so many crazy brain things. Our brains, like, they just, like I said, protective mechanism. I'm going to turtle. I'm just going to go hide. Like, I'm going to dissociate. I'm going to, like, it's so interesting. And not everybody's, it's not like there's a standard way that you deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, too, with all of these, after you go through whatever you've gone through, then there's that additional, I don't know if it rises to the level of trauma, but like people not believing you or validating your experience.
Yeah.
Or saying like, oh, this isn't a real thing, or, oh, you made that up, or, oh, that's not real. Like that can be really difficult in your recovering, your healing as well. So.
Yeah. Hopefully now that we live in a world where psychological support is more out there, that anyone who does go through something like this is able to seek support. Nowadays, at least, you have access to things. You can look something up. You could read. You can find a group. You could find a therapist, Yeah.
We just got to break through those stigmas about mental health.
Yeah.
Well, that was my episode, guys.
I know. And
I talked way too much again.
But it's cool. We're good. I think we hit an hour. We're good. We're good.
Then we're good. So follow us on all of our socials. Send us emails to medicalmediamixer@gmail.com.
And is our next one the field trip? I believe it is. Our next episode that will air. No.
I don't know.
There's one in between. I'm falsely speaking. Look at our document.
You're a liar.
I'm a dirty liar. There's one more.
It's supposed to be, but who knows? TBD. There's going to be a fun one, though.
Yes.
So keep listening.
Field trip.
Yes, field trip. One of many, hopefully.
I hope so. All right. So thank you for listening to Medical Media Mixer.
The perfect cocktail.
Cheers.
Cheers.